My name is Andy Grano. I'm just going to talk to you guys about Google Analytics. We good, Dan? All right, so for anyone who doesn't know, Google Analytics is a service provided by Google that you can use if you have a website. It's free. You can put it on your website. It'll tell you things like how many people came to your website, how long they were there for, what they did on the site, if they bought anything, if they took any sort of action, if they watched a video, anything like that. And it allows you to analyze this data over time, provides a whole bunch of great analysis tools within the interface, and also to export that and plug into any other systems you guys have. So I want to ask you, how many people use Google Analytics here? OK, that's usually the response that we get, most people. So would you guys, who here is, say, a beginner? Any intermediate users? And anyone brave enough to say they're an advanced user? Usually I get one, and I like to pick on them, so you guys are smart. And I guess you guys are mostly entrepreneurs, but would you consider yourself marketers? Or, so we got a few marketers. Any webmasters? People, developers actually implementing the code on Google Analytics? Anybody? OK, one guy back there. So mostly entrepreneurs. OK, great. So a little bit about the history. In 2005, Google acquired Urchin Software, which then ultimately became Google Analytics. We made it in typical Google fashion. We sort of made it free, available to everybody, and followed very much a launch and iterate strategy where rapid innovations to the product to become what it is today, which is an incredible marketing platform for not just web analytics anymore, but we track apps, mobile, really the entire ecosystem. And it's on an incredible percentage of the web, about 60% of the web. Top companies ranging from Travelocity to the WhiteHouse.gov, the FBI, and a whole bunch of other websites as well. So I want to talk a little bit about is how we interact with web technologies today and how Google Analytics collects data on that, why it's important to collect data on that, and how to ultimately take action based on that data from within Google Analytics. So the first thing that we'll likely do is we'll take out some sort of a device, whether it's a smartphone, a tablet, a laptop. Then we'll go to generally a browser, whether it's Chrome, Firefox, Safari, or we might fire up an app. We'll talk about that a little bit separately. From there, we'll likely go to potentially a search engine like Google or Bing, or potentially a social network. We'll go to Facebook or Twitter, or we might check our email, some sort of a starting point. At which point, finally, we'll land on whatever website we're ultimately going to. So there's quite a few steps before we even make it onto the website. And I want to talk about how GA collects data on each one of those. So we'll start with devices. So does behavior vary across devices? So conversion rate is a very, very common web metric. For those who don't know, conversion rate is the % of visits that include a conversion. So what's a conversion? In a typical e-commerce setting, it is a purchase, a transaction. If you don't have e-commerce, people track conversions in all sorts of ways, whether it's downloading an app or watching a video or a PDF file or filling out a form, whatever. The important action that you want visitors to take on your website is a conversion. So if you had to guess, what do you think is the average conversion rate across the entire internet, but only on desktop? So excluding mobile devices, tablets, anything like that, only on desktop. And this is, again, the % of visits that include a conversion. What do you think? 1%. 1%? Half? 50%? 6 to 8%? Any other guesses? 2.5%. OK, so we heard a range from 1% to 50%. It's about 1.9%. So it's pretty small, right? Now, if you had to guess, what is the conversion rate on iPads? And this is, again, across the entire internet, just for iPad users. What % of their visits include a conversion? 60%, 6%, 3%? OK, pretty good. It's about 3.8%. So it's nearly double that on desktop. So why does this matter? Why is this important? Well, it turns out that only 16% of businesses do usability testing on tablets. That number is closer to about 30% for mobile. So clearly, there's an opportunity in tablet computing that people are not taking full advantage of. People are higher spenders on tablets, and yet only 16% of businesses do usability testing. So this is great, but what's the problem with this study?
It's for everyone.
Okay, so
For me.
not for me, exactly. That's exactly right. So what this gentleman said was that this is across the entire internet, right? Which is okay, but aggregate data like that is usually not so meaningful, right? You want to see your data, which could be very different. And in fact, I've observed for particular websites where this is totally not true. Totally different conversion rates, and in fact, where it's totally swapped, where people convert less on iPads. So don't rely on third-party research. With Google Analytics, you can segment your data based on any type of device, as well as operating system, so that you can view conversion rates according to different devices. So you can see how many people converted on iPad versus an Android tablet versus desktop versus an iPhone or anything else. Another sort of very interesting report within Google Analytics related to browser is you can see what % of people can view screens, what portion of the screen. So here you see that about 98% of people that are viewing this site, which happens to be the Google Store, by the way. I use it for a lot of my examples. It's a fun store that sells silly Google merchandise and paraphernalia, no real products, just Google t-shirts and things like that. There's actually an on-site Google Store you guys might be visiting. They're going perfect, yes. So you can see all of the cool products that you can buy on the Google Store online. If you buy them online, then you might find your way into this demo at a later date. But so in this report here, you can see what % of visitors are able to see the visible area. So if there's a really important call to action button that you want your users to click, and you see that only 50% of your users can view it, then you know you have a problem. So you can use the browser size report to get at that data. So I'm going to pause. I want to pause periodically. I ask, are there any questions so far? Comments? All right, feel free to interrupt me at any point. So you've taken out your device, whether it's a computer or a desktop, whatever. Now you open up your browser. You open up Chrome, you open up Firefox, whatever it might be. So you can do a similar analysis for browsers. You can look at conversion rates as they vary across browsers. But there's something a bit more tactical that I think is very useful when it comes to browser analysis, which is to set up custom alerts. So in this alert here, I have browser containing Chrome when transactions are less than $10, less than 10 for a given time period, per hour, per day, however, whatever your volume may be. It will actually send me an email or even a text message. So it'll alert me if something is wrong. So people set up these custom alerts so that if the website is down in a particular browser, you'll know about it right away and will be able to take action to fix it. Right? So time is literally money on the internet. If our website is down for even a very short period of time, you could lose a lot of business. So you set up these custom alerts, and you will be sent messages whenever something happens. But I will note that it's not just for bad things. I also have some of these custom alerts set up for positive. So it says is less than, but you can change it to is greater than. So if your website goes viral, you won't be the last to know about it. You'll get a text message from Google telling you, alerting you to the increased traffic on your site. Any questions about the custom alerts? Okay. So we've opened up our browser, we've opened up our device, we've gone onto some browser, and finally we start to do something, whether it's go to a search engine like Google, or an email, or a social network. So there's a lot of different channels. It's important to segment your data based on where this traffic is coming from, and understand how behavior differs across the different platforms. So Google Analytics, by default, tracks a number of different sources out of the box, such as organic search, social, we'll talk about that, various different referrals. But there are some that require some additional configurations. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about search. It sounds like you got a bit of this, so I'll try to move by it fairly quickly. Just some terminology. That's the search query, searching for a Google t-shirt. Right? These are the organic results that Google has an algorithm to determine what are the best results. It displays them free of charge. And then these are the paid results that companies will pay for to have listed here on Google Analytics. So here I have the Google Analytics blog. Does anybody read the Google Analytics blog? Okay, just the developer in the back. So I would highly recommend reading the Google Analytics blog. There's a lot of great stuff on there. You might see my name from time to time. It's a great blog. But some people find it a little bit uninteresting. It talks about basically one topic, which is Google Analytics. So how many keywords would you guess led traffic to the Google Analytics blog in 1 month? So this is unique keywords. So if I search Google Analytics and then Google Analytics blog on Google, then that will count as 2 unique keywords. So if you had to guess in 1 month time period, how many unique keywords led traffic to the Google Analytics blog that talks about exactly one topic, which is Google Analytics? 1,000? 300? Don't be shy. 3? Anybody else? No idea? 10? Okay, 2 more guesses? 2? 4? 1? Okay, 21,000. 21,000 keywords in a 1 month time period led traffic to the Google blog. And these are unique keywords. So why does this matter? Why is this important? There's a few reasons. First, there's an incredible expectation mismatch that I always find between what people are expecting to see and what they ultimately see. Second is that it's extremely important to understand why people are coming to your website in the first place. You might find out things that you would have never expected. And we literally have 21,000 reasons that people give us why they're coming to their website. Right? You type into the Google search bar something you're looking for, you click on the link. That's exactly what you're looking for when you come to that website. So literally, we do score through the records to see, especially for the long tail, the keywords that not so many people search for. Those are particularly interesting to find out why people were coming to the blog. And the third reason has to do with AdWords. So a lot of Google research has found that when you control the message, which is you have a paid ad on a particular keyword, it works extremely well in tandem with an organic result. So you want to make sure that you have coverage across all of the possible keywords that people are searching to get to your site. So you don't want to have your competitor take out a keyword that people might be looking for your site. So if you don't believe me, there's the number, the screenshot from Google Analytics. I've had someone said it can't be. You know. So that's Google search. Now we're on to the new hot area in the digital world, which is social. So Avinash said, social media is like teen sex. Everybody wants to do it. Nobody actually knows how. When done, they're surprised it's not better. For those who don't know Avinash, he is a rock star of the web analytics world. I highly recommend you watch one of his talks. He's hilarious and definitely over the top. Not so much my style, but borrow a little bit from him. So there are over 450 social networks that are classified automatically by Google Analytics. So if somebody comes from Facebook or one of the other 400 plus websites and comes to your site, Google Analytics will pick that up as social traffic and automatically classify that. So you can then correlate that with everything else happening on your site, like conversion behavior. So usually what we find is that certainly Facebook, Twitter, Google Plus send large portions of traffic to websites, but there's always some in the long tail that, for whatever reason, are very popular for individual sites. So because of that, we make sure to classify any social network that we can find. But what we really don't want is people to focus on the vanity metrics like likes and plus ones and retweets and things like that. Our philosophy is we want to tie social to an actual dollar value. Right? So what we have here is a new visualization that we debuted with the social analytics reports. The outmost circle shows how many total conversions you had on the site. So again, this is from the Google store. There are about 20,000 conversions. 11,000 conversions, the secondmost circle, is how many of those were touched by social at some point in the funnel. So maybe I saw something on a social network, came to the site, but then came back 2 weeks later and from Google search and converted. So that's how many maybe had some interaction with social. And then 2,000, the innermost circle, is how many were a direct result of a social visit. So I went to Facebook, I came to the Google store, and I purchased. So this gives you the complete picture of how much transactions and conversions are happening on my site, how many are related to social, and how many are a direct result. So we don't want to just look at vanity metrics like likes and plus ones. We want to actually tie social to a dollar value so that we know how much to invest in that channel. Any questions on social or on search? Yes?
But you don't know the social data of the people that is clicking, right?
So in terms of social data, what do you mean by?
For example, is he married? Is he 34 years old? Or
No, so we do not get demographic information. And in fact, that's a good broader point about Google Analytics, is that there's no personally identifiable information tracked within Google Analytics. So we take a strong stance on privacy. So you will never see anything like name or email address or anything like that within Google Analytics.
But you identify that your traffic is coming from Facebook, but you don't know if they are teenagers or...
That's correct. That's correct. And on that point, something that has been sort of established for almost for decades is that behavioral metrics, such as how many times someone has visited a store or made a purchase, are actually far more predictive of what's going to happen in the future than any sort of demographic information. So I'm not saying that the demographics are not important, but the behavioral metrics are what the original direct marketers have used literally for decades. And some of that gets lost in the web analytics world with so many data points that exist. So to some degree, I'm a strong proponent of sort of going back to the digital marketing, or the direct marketing roots, and looking at behavioral data as opposed to some of the other things that are available today. Any other? It's a great question, though. Yes?
What is the time period that you can track the purchases? I first click on and purchase maybe a couple of weeks, but what is the time period?
Yeah, so from attaching from one click to another purchase that might be, yeah, so currently right now in Google Analytics it's 30 days, but we are definitely aware that people, for certain businesses, the life cycle is longer, and we are working on expanding that possible range as well. Yeah, I got the 10-minute mark, so I'm gonna move quickly, but I do want to take questions. Any other questions? Yes?
You, in the last 6 months, 1 year, you bring a lot of functionalities from the Webmaster Tool to Analytics.
Yes.
It's a way to merge them?
So the question was, there's a Webmaster Tools integration. So with Google Analytics, you can see directly what people are searching for and then correlate that with everything else. With Webmaster Tools data, what you get is you actually get how many impressions, so how many times, 2 minutes I have? Oh, 20 minutes, okay, we're good. In Webmaster Tools integration with Google Analytics, if you link the accounts, then not only will you see how many people clicked on for particular keywords, but also how many impressions. So if I search for Google Store and I don't ultimately click on it, with the Webmaster Tools data, you'll be able to then see how many people saw that particular result, but maybe didn't click on it. So you get a click-through rate for organic listings. And the answer is that no, that data is separate from Google Analytics. So you can correlate keyword data that you get if someone visits, but the Webmaster Tools data is kept separate. They're separate data sets.
At the end of the day, it's a concept to evolve your store. So it's not the same concept, the both of tools?
Right, so what I would recommend for that data is to just look at the search organic keywords report, so not in Webmaster Tools, and that will give you the actual keywords that people are searching, and you could correlate all of that. So really the only missing link is the impressions, if people saw and didn't click. So that's considered sort of not your data, which I guess is why it's not correlated. Okay, so I'm going to talk about one more of these traffic channels, and it's probably not the one that you would expect. I'm going to talk about tracking offline. So even if you have offline campaigns, you can still track them with Google Analytics. So the easiest way is with a QR code, but there are a variety of other techniques as well. What you do is you put into this little tool URL builder, you can specify the name of the source, the medium, the campaign name, and some other additional information that you want Google Analytics to pick up. And if you, then it comes up with this special URL for you. And if you then give somebody that link and click on that, then Google Analytics will pull in whatever data you entered here. So common ways that people use this are definitely in QR codes. So people will scan QR codes and have those have this special URL that you can create here. Other common ways are URL shorteners or vanity URLs. So frequently you'll see this in newspaper ads, either a short URL or a vanity URL that's only used once for the marketing purposes. And it will have this special URL. It'll redirect to the special URL that Google Analytics will be able to pull that data in. So with Google Analytics, you can even track offline campaigns such as newspaper, print, or even massive billboards in Times Square. So we've taken out our phone, we've gone to a browser, Google search, or a social network, and eventually we land on the site. So in the interest of time, maybe I'll just fly through this very quickly. So once you land on the site, I do want to talk in a little bit more technical detail how Google Analytics works. It sometimes leads to a potentially deeper understanding of some of the data that you're seeing. So you load your website on any device. The Google Analytics, which is a small snippet of JavaScript, will begin to load. If you have not been to the website before, Google Analytics will write a persistent first-party cookie to the browser. If you have visited the site before, then it'll read the values from that cookie. It'll then gather all sorts of information, such as the browser that you're viewing, the time that you've been on the site, where you came from, all sorts of other information, and put that in a little GIF request that's made to Google's servers. It'll make that GIF request, send all that information to Google. We'll process that data, and then ultimately make it turn it into dimensions and metrics and make sense of it, and then ultimately make it available to you, the user, out of either the user interface or the API for programmatic use. Any questions about this process? I went through pretty quickly. It can be a bit technical. If you zoned out, that's OK. So this is sort of what an example GIF request looks like. You could see that there's some information that Google uses to pull from it, such as campaigns and other things like that. So from that one GIF request, we get all sorts of dimensions and metrics. And this all comes out of the box with that one, without any additional customization. So this is even a very incomplete list. There just wasn't enough room on the slide for everything. So there's things like page, what pages these people have seen, what countries you came from, what city you came from, if you're a new visitor or an old visitor, how many times you've been, where you came from, all sorts of technology information such as your device, your operating system, your browser. So pretty much anything you can dream up, Google Analytics will collect data about. So after all this, we finally land on the site. We finally land on the homepage to the Google Store. So what I want to talk about is one of the most critically acclaimed metrics in the web analytics world, which is bounce rate. I think Avinash declared it the most sexy web analytics metric. Who here has heard of bounce rate? OK, would anybody be brave enough to define it for me? One person? Yes, we got a brave guy in the front.
Percent of people who went to the site but did nothing and just
That's exactly right. Round of applause. Yeah. So that's exactly right. The percent of people that visited the site and immediately left, and that's called a bounce if you go and you leave. So why do people like it so much? Well, because you can look at it across so many different dimensions and draw action from it. So if we take a look here, Google T-shirt has about a 46% bounce rate, which means that almost half the people that come to the website from the keyword Google T-shirt immediately leave. In contrast, Google has a much higher bounce rate. So actually, 46% is not a bad bounce rate. If you think about your own online behavior, you're probably opening up websites and closing them all the time. So 46 is actually pretty good. In contrast, the #1 keyword Google is actually a pretty high and not so good bounce rate of 82%. So a higher bounce rate is bad because that means more people are immediately leaving. So what we kind of learn here is that people searching for Google and that find their way to the Google Store are probably, this is not what they had in mind. So you should also look at bounce rate against a whole host of other dimensions, such as various different traffic sources. Are people from Facebook? How do they compare to Twitter? Do they leave right away, or do they continue to do things? Various campaigns, landing pages is a great dimension to look at it across. So people that land on a particular one page versus another, do they stay or do they leave? If there's a really high bounce rate on a particular landing page, then you need to improve that landing page. That's great and all, right? But what's the problem with bounce rate? What's wrong with everyone's favorite web metric? So this is not so easy, so feel free to take wild guesses. What's misleading about bounce rate? And again, this is just defined as people who come to a page and then immediately leave, or leave before viewing another page. See people scratching their heads in the back. Okay, yeah.
Have you seen the kind of the website, or if it's a blog, for example, the bounce rate is going to be high because it just grows, so it doesn't matter the interaction. It's a e-commerce, it's a bit more sensible to this analysis, so we gotta see very, very good at that.
Okay, so the answer there was that on a blog, right, you're only really, it's okay if somebody leaves because they might want to just read the article that's on the homepage and then leave, and that's actually considered a success, right? Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
I mean, eventually, everyone will leave my site.
Yeah. Okay, eventually anyone will leave the site.
But how does it affect the bounce rate?
So if you view come out, land on the page, and then visit another page, so then that will not be a bounce.
Okay.
Yeah. So it turns out that was actually pretty close. That it's not necessarily a bad thing to have just a visit with one page view, right? So a blog is a great example. You might come, spend 10 minutes on the same page, and do all sorts of stuff like maybe watch the video and whatever, and it's actually not a bad thing at all. So it turns out that with Google Analytics, you can implement what are called events, which are actions that are taken on the particular page that are important. And if somebody interacts with your page in some way using an event, then it will no longer count as a bounce. So one example of this that a lot of blogs implement is sort of scroll tracking. So if you scroll to see a certain portion of the page, then that will be considered a success. We'll fire an event. Google will be data will be sent to Google Analytics, and we will not count that visit as a bounce. Another example is videos. So if you have a video on the homepage and somebody watches the video, that might be a successful visit, or at least not a bounce. It might not be a conversion, but it's not a bounce.
Or single-page apps, right?
Or single-page apps, exactly. There's very frequently, you'll have just a launch page or a landing page or something like that. So in that case, track events, right? So track interactions with the page that you consider successful, and then you'll get a much more accurate bounce rate. So what are examples of some of those on-site actions? So we have outbound links, so links away from the website, which clearly you can't track other sites that people visit, but you can track the links that they click to get there. Site search, we'll talk about that in a moment. So if somebody has internally, you have a little search bar. If someone searches, you can track that. E-commerce. Form submissions, so if you have any forms, you can certainly collect data on interactions between there. Any sort of on-site activities, any user-inputted data, dynamic content, Flash, Ajax, any interactive things like that. And also metadata on the page you can collect as well. So in addition, so Google Analytics will pull in the URL and the page title, but you might want to collect some additional metadata on that page, which you can do as well. So just because we can track all of these actions does not mean that we necessarily should. So I've seen websites implement basically tracking everything left and right that they could think of. And once they looked at their Google Analytics reports, there was just so much data in there they couldn't make any sense of it. So I want to talk about a few things that are worthwhile to collect data on. And this actually gets to a pretty deep question, which is, what am I trying to achieve online? Why am I in business in the first place? And what website actions indicate success? Do I care if somebody clicks on a link to some random site, or maybe it is really important to me? So why all of these metrics? What matters beyond the conversion? We've talked a lot about conversion so far and how this is the gold standard. So if you only track conversions, right, we saw the average conversion rate was around 2%. So if you're only concerned about conversions, you're throwing away about 98% of your data, which can have some pretty useful insights. So I'd like to talk about this concept called micro and macro conversions. So a macro conversion is what you might think of as a transaction or something like that. A micro conversion is something that might lead to a macro conversion. So examples of that are maybe doing research, so visiting a whole bunch of pages or watching a video, maybe creating a new account, navigating to some other website that is considered a success for you. So if you track and start thinking in terms of these micro conversions, you actually get a lot more data that can then become actionable. So back to some of the things that I think you should be tracking. So internal site search. So here we are on the Google Store. This is one of the favorites, YouTube socks. So you can buy YouTube socks. So tube socks, YouTube. Get it? Yeah. Ha. Not my joke. It's the Google Store. So anyway, they sell YouTube socks at the Google Store. You can search for this on the internal search bar. And when that happens in the URL, it will actually say Q equals YouTube socks. So within the Google Analytics interface, you can configure such that whenever they see this URL, Q equals something, it'll pick that up and it will know that it's an internal site search. So does this look familiar to anybody? Does this ring a bell? One guy? So around April 1st, yeah, so around April 1st this year, Google announced that they were launching 8-bit maps. So it's Google Maps in the classic Super Nintendo style. And it even comes with the Super Nintendo game that you can plug into your old Super Nintendo and view Google Maps. So we're pretty famous for our April Fool's joke. This was definitely one of the best. And it fooled a lot of people. In fact, one guy on Reddit said, "How is this usable? I don't get it. Would Google do something this complex just for shits and giggles?" The answer is yes, we would. We do. So anyhow, what does this have to do with internal site search? So it turns out when I was preparing this presentation a few months back, I saw a big spike in traffic, internal search terms for maps and Google Maps and things like that. And I was scratching my head. I was like, why all of a sudden around April 1st did we see such a big increase in this traffic? And of course, then I realized it turned out to be a direct result of this April Fool's joke that we pulled. So without looking at this data, I would have never known that people were interested in this type of thing at the Google Store. So the Google Store does pretty low level of transactions, maybe like in dozens per day. But you can see that there were actually quite a few searches, about 1,500. So relative to the volume that the Google Store does, this represents a fairly significant opportunity that we passed up. We could have sold some merchandise related to Google 8-bit maps and probably made a little bit of money for the Google Store. So if looking at the search terms that people type in organic search tell you what people are looking for when they're looking to find your site, internal site search will then tell you what they're looking for once they've found your site and within your site. So it's actually one of the more interesting things to do is to look at the two, link them together. So you might say, what were people originally looking for when they found your site? And then were they unable to find it? And what search terms were they looking for once they got to your site? So it might indicate that there's something that's hard to find on your website. So similarly, I recommend sort of pouring through them and seeing various terms that people are searching for. I'm going to pause. Any questions about anything so far?
Something I'm curious about is with the web turning a bit more visual and with Pinterest type of sites and everything, there's going to be more flow of non-query related traffic, right? And if there's anything that we can do to track image search.
Yeah, so the question was there's going to be a lot more traffic that's not directly Google search results. So actually, that's definitely true, and we're preparing for that. But the truth is, on most websites, the vast majority of traffic remains coming from Google web search. However, we do track image search, so that's picked up, and you can actually see the keywords that come from image search as well. Likewise, you could see traffic coming from YouTube or pretty much any other website. There are special ones like social that we pull out and make them special and say this is social traffic. So basically, as these new forms come up, we sort of do our best to stay out in front of it and make sure that Google Analytics will collect data on it. And not only just if it's coming, but also what are the most meaningful metrics associated with that traffic. Does that help? Yeah.
There are some times when we're measuring conversion or transactions that we feel like a little data is not very consistent between the data on our servers. Is it normal? Is it a bad implementation? What is it?
Okay, so the question was they're sometimes seeing conversion or transaction behavior on their site that's inconsistent with what they're seeing internally. So my first recommendation about comparing different systems is just sort of don't, because there are different data collection methodologies and you will see differences. The most important thing I would say is look at the data and see, are you going to make a different decision based on the two different data sets that you have? If you would make a different decision, then that's a problem and you need to fix it. If not, if you're off by a small percentage and you would sort of make the same decision to invest more in a particular product or channel anyway, then sort of don't worry about it, focus on other things. So it can be a number of different things. We do see it from time to time. Some of the most common issues are implementation problems where perhaps you aren't tracking a particular page. So you need to have the Google Analytics tracking code on all of the pages on your website. So it's possible that you're missing some pages. It's also possible that it is just different collection methodologies. So maybe the way sessions are calculated is always different, something like that. So there is definitely a degree of error that would be expected. But my main recommendation would be that if your decision would change, then make sure to figure out what's going on. Otherwise, focus on analyzing the data. But that's a great question. Yeah?
What's the difference between the open Google Analytics and corporate Google Analytics, and why it's not available to Google?
Okay, so the question was about Google Analytics Premium. So Google Analytics Premium is a new offering. We launched it last September for large enterprises primarily. What comes with the new version is just a few features that large enterprises really need in order to adopt Google Analytics. So what we found is that within enterprises, there were sort of these rogue groups, and we're talking very large enterprises, companies like Travelocity and these large internet businesses. It was that there were sort of these rogue groups that were implementing Google Analytics even though they weren't supposed to, because they use it on their blog or their personal site, and they just love it compared to some of the other enterprise analytics vendors. But there were certain reasons around security, data protection, things like that, that were preventing large enterprises from using Google Analytics. So we launched Google Analytics Premium as a result to that. So it sort of increased limits for very large properties. It includes some support. It includes a few extra features like unsampled downloads and things like that. But by and large, it's really meant primarily for large enterprises. So for small businesses are totally unaffected, and we continue to actively develop features for both the free and the premium version. Any other questions before I move on? No? Okay. So GA collects a ton of data. This is, again, just a small snapshot of everything that Google Analytics collects. But it doesn't collect everything. And in particular, it doesn't collect weather data. Right, so I heard a laugh over there. And it's true, you would never expect that Google Analytics would collect weather data, right? Why? What does that have to do with anything? And it's true. I don't think we ever had the conversation, should we collect weather data? We didn't. And we're not going to. We have no plans to. However, for some businesses, it actually might be valuable. In particular, in the travel industry, some travel, such as Travelocity, whatever, are interested in hearing whether or not visits and transactions to, say, tropical places increase on rainy days, things like that. So there's a feature in Google Analytics called custom variables. And with these custom variables, you can pull any external data source or data from your own website or something that Google Analytics is not collecting and actually pass that in to Google Analytics. and we'll then be able to correlate that with everything else that's happening on your website. So what this particular client did was they integrated with one of the weather APIs to pull the current location, the weather, and I think just if it was sunny, cloudy, or raining, and the temperature for a given user, which into Google Analytics, which they then correlated with transactions to various different summer getaways and things like that. So you can see here, now we have, you can segment on sunny days or on cloudy days or rainy days within Google Analytics. So this is really when I want you guys to get creative and think about what other data sets you might want to integrate with. So back to this, we've talked mostly about the user interface, but there's actually, the Google Analytics API is extremely popular. And I'm just going to talk about it very quickly. So if you had the foresight to say, I want to correlate weather behavior with my online activity, then you can use custom variables and pass that data in. But if this stroke of genius only happens after the fact, you can use the Google Analytics API to export your data out of Google Analytics and into some other system, and then pull in historic weather data and correlate the two that way offline. So that's just one of the many uses of the Google Analytics API. Question, yeah?
Do you have a plan to have a native functionality that exports Google Analytics data for the spreadsheet?
So the answer is yes, and we actually recently launched it as of a couple weeks ago. So we have an integration with Google Apps Scripts and Google Docs. So what that allows, I don't know if you guys have played with App Scripts at all, or if you, I don't know if you heard about them today, but they're sort of like.
Production?
Yes.
There's a name for it? No, it's just a plugin.
You can read on the Google Analytics blog. There's a little demo, and it's very customizable. But if for the basics, then you can just, there's basically a little, it's something called Magic Scripts. There's an interface. You get your Google Analytics data in Google Spreadsheets.
Mood stores?
It's,
You can merge mood stores?
yes, you can merge multiple Google Analytics accounts into one. It's a great way to create very easy dashboards and share them because you can import that data into Google Spreadsheets, then put it on a Google site and have share it with whoever and have dashboards and things like that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So the GA API, that uses the GA API, it's great. People love it. I recommend it. So that's sort of a use case for using the API to analyze your own data. If you're really ambitious and want to create your own Google Analytics app, we have our own little mini app store and an ecosystem built around Google Analytics where you can use the API to build some other third-party app to use other people's data. So examples of this are sort of mobile apps that people created to view Google Analytics data, integrations with many third parties such as e-commerce sites. WordPress and Tumblr use the API to have, whenever someone uses a blog on WordPress or Tumblr, they'll have Google Analytics automatically installed, things like that. So there's a lot of great apps here that you might want to use yourself, or if you have some great idea, you can also use the API and make your app available to everybody else. So with that, I will conclude. Thank you very much for having me. I hope you enjoy your visit at Google.